Hello there, my name is Megan and I am the Pony Club Centre coach here at Widbrook Equestrian Centre. These mini-series are being put together whilst we're on lockdown so that we can keep working towards our badges and increase our knowledge during these difficult times. This mini-series are going to focus on the Lorinery badge, which is bitting and bits, so I hope you enjoy them. Hello Pony Clubbers. So we're now on to week 4 of the Lorinery badge, where this week we're going to be having a look at nosebands, martingales, and we're also going to have a look at the saddle as well, so that we incorporate the Saddlery badge into these Lorinery videos as well, so that those of you that are looking at doing the Saddlery badge instead can still work towards that, and those that are working towards the mini Saddlery badge can complete that as well. So we're going to look at those today. We're also going to have a look at bitting considerations, because now that we've looked at different bits and what they're used for and how we why we would choose one over the other, we're going to have a look at the considerations we make and when we choose a bit and what type of bit we choose. I'm also going to cover bitless bridles as well, as we've not covered those yet, and some call that a fifth bitting group. So we will have a look at bitless bridles and why you might use those as well. So that's what we're going to look at this week. So I hope you enjoy it. Pre-bitting considerations. So this is what we need to consider before we choose a bit for our horse or pony. So the images that I'm going to show you are from the Pony Club hut at Widbrook, and they are Pony Club pictures, and they're just a bit of humour just to show you what you need to consider. The first image that I've put up here is actually of me and Spirit at a dressage camp. The reason for that is because you'll also need to check with the governing bodies for which bits that you're allowed to use. So that's also something you need to consider. So if you participate in dressage competitions, there is a set number of bits that you're allowed to use, so you'll need to check those as well. So that's just to add on to the rest of the images here. And so on to the Pony Club images. So the first one, consider the shape of your horse's mouth when selecting his bit. Very important. Secondly, bit according to the pony's age and level of schooling, also the rider's ability. Ensure the bit you use is the correct width, neither too wide nor too narrow, as this will be uncomfortable. Have your pony's mouth and teeth routinely checked and maintained by an equine dental physician or a vet, at least annually. Understand the effect upon the bit of nosebands and martingales, and do not over-tighten nosebands. Have a clear knowledge of the families of bitting and their action on the pony's mouth, also how the pony may react to this. Wash the bit after every ride to avoid sores and or infection, preferably not with it in the pony's mouth as here. The bit is only as severe as the rider at the end of the reins. Remember the bits are tools, not magic wands. Success will depend on the skill or not of the rider. Okay, so ultimately the action of the bit is in your hands. So it's very important to remember that. We need to take all these considerations into account when we're choosing a bit for our horse or pony. So if, for example, you have a young horse, you may want to look at the kinder bits, the kinder snaffles, and also to consider why a horse may resist to the bit as well. So pain or fear of the bit, if you're too strong with your hands, any of those kind of factors you'll need to take into consideration when choosing a bit for your horse or pony. If in any doubt, then the best thing to do is to ask a qualified professional. So either ask your instructor, your British Horse Society or Pony Club instructor, ask your dentist, your horse's dentist, and or you can also ask a bitting expert. There are now organisations and people out there that will come and specifically look at bitting your horse or pony and what's correct for them. But start with your instructor and your horse's dentist. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at different types of nosebands. As you can see in the picture here, we have 4 different types, and we're going to go through those various different types, explaining why you might use them, the features of each of these nosebands, and how they should be fitted correctly.
Right, so this is a horse here. This is Raven. You might recognise her. So she is at the moment wearing a snaffle bridle made of leather with a cavesson noseband. Then we want to do our cavesson up. So we want to make sure, you've got to make sure you have a look at the front. Is it straight? Is everything straight? Is everything in place properly? Is the noseband straight? And you want to make sure there's at least 2 fingers from the projecting cheekbone, which you can feel here. Hopefully you can see that, and the cavesson. This could probably be dropped a little bit lower on her, but that's where it is at the moment. She's quite happy with that. And I personally do my cavessons up really, really loose. When I've been at BD competitions and the steward has checked my tack, they tend to have a little bit of a giggle because they're like, well, that's clearly not going to be too tight. Tightness though, it should never be tighter than your 2 fingers. You should be able to get your 2 fingers in there with a cavesson, 1 finger for a drop or the flash part of the flash noseband, and your grackle on both parts there. The reason for that is that the idea of those is to so the horse can't open its mouth as much. You still want them to open the mouth a little bit, because you still want them to be able to chew on this bit. You want them to be able to chew on that, okay? So they need to be able to open the mouth a little bit to be able to do that, otherwise they can't flex and work correctly and salivate, which is what we want them to do. Okay?
In the image here, we can see that the horse is wearing a drop noseband. So you can tell that it's a drop noseband because the strap fastens underneath the bit rather than above it. And the front of the noseband is over the front of the nose there. Okay, so this noseband must be fitted very carefully to avoid interfering with the horse's breathing. As you can see, you don't want to get too close to the nostrils. If it was placed further down, then it would go onto a very soft part of the horse's nose, which would interfere with the breathing. It's got to make sure that it's on the bone. It's fastened below the bit, as you can see. The front should be 4 fingers width above the nostrils, which you can see it is there in this image, and the back should rest in the chin groove. Again, we can see that in this image. The front must remain high. This is achieved by either the front strap being fitted onto a spike on the ring on which it is sewn, or by a short piece of leather sewn in to join the front strap to the back piece. So this one has got a ring on it to help that to happen. The front strap must be short enough to allow the cheek piece to fit well in front of the line of the horse's lips, so the noseband will not pinch or rub the corners of the mouth. The noseband should be fitted loosely enough for the horse to be able to relax his jaw, but snugly enough for him to feel the pressure on his nose when he tries to open his mouth too wide, cross his jaw, or to draw his tongue back. So the purpose of using a drop noseband as compared to a cavesson, and all various different types of the dropped type nosebands, are designed to prevent horses from resisting the bit. So they're designed for specific resistances. Okay, they should only be used in conjunction with a snaffle bridle, and it's important that the pressure does not drop down too far into the weak part of the nose bone, as we already discussed. Here we have a pony wearing a flash noseband. So this is a cavesson noseband, fitted as the same, but with an additional lower strap which is attached to the front of the noseband, which we can see on this. This strap should pass well above the nostrils at the front of the nose and should be fastened below the bit, just like the drop noseband. In some types, the cavesson is padded for extra comfort. You can also use a standing martingale with this noseband by attaching it to the back of the cavesson. This pony is not wearing a standing martingale, though he is wearing what's known as a running martingale, which we cover in this video. Next up we have the grackle noseband, otherwise known as the crossed noseband. This is used for the same purposes as the drop, but has an additional strap above the bit. It acts over a wider area and is thus more effective in preventing the horse from crossing his jaw. It is made up of 2 leather straps which cross over at the bridge of the nose with a pad beneath the join. This one has sheepskin on it as well, as you can see. The straps pass around the horse's face and are buckled above and below the bit. The crossover is fitted higher up on the nose than a drop noseband and is therefore especially practical for cross-country use. This is because the horse is much less free in terms of where it's breathing. You can see, because it's so much higher up, there's less chance of the breathing being interfered with, and you need that when you're going cross-country. Otherwise, the principal fitting is the same as that of the drop noseband. The Kinton noseband, unlike the other nosebands we've already looked at, has no backstrap to prevent free movement of the horse's jaw. But when it is correctly adjusted, the effect is that the pull from the reins, instead of only being on the bit, is partially or wholly transferred to the front of the nose. This is often effective on a hard puller. The noseband has an adjustable leather front strap fitted to a metal loop on each side, which we can see here. The loops are then hooked around the mouthpiece of the bit. We don't have a bit on this horse, so we can't see that here. Between the bit rings and the horse's mouth. The front should be at least 4 fingers width above the nostrils. Whilst you may not see a Kinton noseband so much anymore, we definitely do see what's known as combination bridles, where the pressure is a combination of on the bits and on the horse's nose, and so it's similar in how they work to this type of noseband.
Okay, I did say we're going to have a look at the difference between a cavesson noseband and what's known as a lunge cavesson. So what Raven's wearing right now is a lunge cavesson. As you can see, it's different to the noseband. The idea of the lunge cavesson is for lunging the horse, and on the front of the nose, on the front of the noseband of it, you've got sets of rings. And the idea for these is to put your lunge line on, or you could put long lines on to long line them. But this is for lunging. Don't ride the horse in this. This is for groundwork.
Here we can see the lunge cavesson in use, attached to the lunge line. Now that we've had a look at each different type of noseband, have a go and see if you're able to name each of the nosebands that we looked at the beginning here. So we've got 4 different types. Have a go, see if you're able to name them. We've looked at all 4 of them, so if you're unsure, then just have a look back through the video and check to see whether you're right. Good luck! So here we have a bitless bridle. There are a variety of different types of bitless bridles, some that are more mild, some that are much more severe. This type is just used across the nose there. As you can see, the pressure will be across the front of the nose when the reins are pulled. These are often known as a side pull, or sometimes they can be known as a bocelle, depending on what type of material they're made out of. You'll often see bitless bridles in Western riding. Sometimes you'll see them for English riding, but generally speaking, because they're not allowed in dressage competitions and therefore not some parts of eventing, you don't see them as often for the 3 main equestrian sports, although they are allowed in show jumping, so you will see them sometimes in the show jumping ring. This type of bitless bridle is known as a hackamore, and the Pony Club manual discusses this particular bitless bridle. So it has no mouthpiece, but acts by leverage on the nose, poll and chin groove, which you can see with the shanks there, how that would work on leverage. So although the mouth area is not affected by the hackamore, it should be realised that the nose, poll and chin groove are all delicate, highly sensitive areas and are just as easily damaged. Severe injuries on these areas, which are sometimes permanent, can frequently be observed after prolonged use of this particular bridle. Okay. In the hands of an expert, it is sometimes effective on a horse with a spoiled, damaged or otherwise difficult mouth. But the hackamore does not belong in the realms of classical riding and cannot be recommended for normal use. So that's Pony Club's view on the hackamore. That's because, as you can see, this type of bridle is more severe than the one we just had a look at, the one that looks more like a head collar. This one is similar to a curb bit, really, just without the mouthpiece. So that's why we've just got to be a bit more careful in the use of that particular type of bitless bridle, but that doesn't mean that all bitless bridles are as severe as this one.
Just to go over what Raven's wearing at the moment. So she at the moment has got her dressage bridle on. So this is her snaffle dressage bridle. The bit she's got in at the moment is a hanging cheek snaffle, which you can see here has these pieces here. So it just has, it's almost like the top part of a pelham bit, and some people say that it provides a little bit of pole pressure, the pole being up here, but others say that actually it's not going to provide any pole pressure, it's just going to, if I show you this side, when I pull on the rein here, it's actually just moving the cheek because this is a bit more flexible, the pole isn't. But the idea is that it shortens the space between the cheek piece, the bit and the pole. So you can see when I pull that, there's a little tiny bit of leverage happening there, a tiny bit. But regardless of how it, how that works, whether it is a bit more pressure on the cheeks or whether it is a bit of pole pressure, it can be useful as it's a dressage legal bit. If you've got a horse or a pony that's a little bit strong, for dressage, you need a little bit more control. That's why we've got it on here. It just helps to have a little bit more control in the dressage for us. She's also wearing a crank noseband, so it looks very much like a cavesson, but it fastens up differently, which I probably won't be able to show you on camera. But instead of just fastening as we would expect, the strap goes back on itself, so you can make it tighter than an ordinary cavesson. As you can see, mine is really is really loose. The reason she's got a cavesson is because the bridle came with it, and I wanted one that was a patent one that looked a bit posh. So actually she's not got it done up very tight at all. I can still slide 2 fingers in there as I would with any cavesson. The other thing she's wearing is a standing martingale. So the standing martingale stops her from putting her head up too high out of control. So if her head's up too high, the bit is not going to be on any part of her mouth, it's going to go back onto her teeth. And from there, there's no way that I can control her. So the saying, the horse having its bit between its teeth, generally refers to a very determined person, somebody that's going to get something done regardless of what's obstacles in their way. We don't want that from our horses. If they get the bit between their teeth, or if they have the bit against their teeth with their head up, we can't stop them using the bit. Of course you can hopefully stop them with your body weight, but of course if you're out of balance as well because of a sudden movement, you need to be able to get that horse back under control. As rider safety is always paramount, followed very closely by horse welfare, but of the two, you need to keep your rider safe before anything else. So the standing martingale here, see if I can get you to see it, attaches, so it attaches to her noseband. You can only use this with a cavesson or with a flash noseband attached to the cavesson strap. It must never be attached to a drop noseband, a grackle, or attached to the bottom strap of a flash. You want it so that you can put it into the gullet. That's how you know that it's not too short. So you want it to reach there, and it will attach via a loop to your horse's girth, and it just stops the horse from putting their head up beyond the point of control. So that's what she's wearing there.
In this image, we already know that the horse is wearing a drop noseband. The other thing the horse is wearing is a running martingale. So this is attached to the girth and passes between the forelegs. It then divides into 2, each of the ends being fitted with a ring through which the reins are passed, which we can see there. There's 2 rings onto the reins, and we can see underneath the horse's right foreleg where it's attached to the girth. Like the standing martingale that we've already looked at, it is supported by a neck strap. Again, you can see that there. A running martingale provides a regulating influence on a horse which carries its head too high. It must be correctly fitted so that it only takes effect when the horse raises its head beyond the angle of control. As you can see in this image, it's not in use, it's loose, because the horse is in control. The horse has not raised its head in this image beyond the point of control. She is well within that point, so the martingale is loose. However, if she decided to raise her head up, then it would start to tighten. If it's fitted too short, its effect is to bring constant pressure on the bars of the mouth, which can only result in their being bruised or becoming dead. Okay. As a rough guide for fitting the martingale, when it's attached to the girth and both rings are taken to one side, the martingale should be long enough to reach to the horse's withers. Remember, the withers are just in front of where the rider's hands are in this image. The reins should be threaded through the rings so that the rings can run freely up and down the reins. The reins should be fitted with stops between the rings and the bit to prevent the rings becoming caught over the hook billets of the rein or any part of the bit. And we can see that there are some rubber stops just in front of the rings there. The neck strap should be fitted as for the standing martingale, which we've already looked at. In this image here we can see what's known as an Irish martingale. So this consists of 2 rings connected by a strap approximately 10 centimetres long. Its purpose is to keep the reins in place and prevent them from going over the horse's head. Sometimes see that in racing. So the snaffle reins should be passed through the rings underneath the horse's neck, and that's how you would fit it. It's not attached in any other way. It's simply to prevent the reins from being taken over the horse's head if the rider should come off. Here we have what's known as a bib martingale, which is a combination of running and Irish martingales. A leather bib, as you can see here, fills the space where the running martingale becomes divided into 2 straps. Its fitting is the same as for the running martingale, and the action is also the same, except the rings hold the reins slightly closer together, as you can see here, because they won't move apart because you've got the bib place in the middle. In order to cover the Saddlery badge as well as the Lorinery badge, for those of you that feel you're not quite ready for the Lorinery badge, we're going to have a look at saddles as well. So as we can see in this picture here, there's a variety of different types of saddle. These are the most common ones you'll come into contact with. Okay, so at the far right you've got your all-purpose saddle, your general purpose, sometimes called a GP saddle. It's in for general purpose. As its name implies, this saddle is designed for general riding. It is a suitable type for most pony club activities. It can be built on a spring tree or a rigid tree, which may result in a slightly flatter seat with the latter. The cut of the saddle flaps and the length of the seat are midway between those of the dressage and show jumping saddles. The panel is usually continental or French. Okay. Moving on to the dressage saddle, so at the far left. This is generally a deep-seated saddle with a straight-cut saddle flap. It is often built on a spring tree and fitted with long girth straps and a short girth to prevent the girth buckle lying under the rider's thigh. The panel is usually continental or French. Now, moving on to the show jumping saddle. This type of saddle usually has a flatter seat than the dressage type. Designed for riding with shorter stirrup leathers, it has a forward cut saddle flap. Generally it's built on a spring tree and the panel is continental or French. Okay, so the eventing saddle is midway between the general purpose and the jumping saddle. So the idea of an event saddle is to be used for your cross country. So you might want to use your eventing saddle in your show jumping as well. But the idea is that it would help you across country as well, for when you're up in that 2-point seat where you're galloping across the country out of the saddle. Okay, so it's to help you in your jumping and your galloping. All 4 of these saddles shown here are made out of leather, but you can also get synthetic saddles, and these are being produced in ever-increasing quantity and quality, and they often prove to be cheaper to buy and can be absolutely satisfactory to ride in. So you may find that if your budget doesn't allow for a good quality leather saddle, you may be able to find a very good quality synthetic saddle instead and be perfectly happy with that. So those are your main types of saddle. Just talking about the panel types, there are various different designs of panel. We will look at panels in a moment, but many of them incorporate knee rolls at the front, which help keep the rider's leg in place, and some also have thigh rolls between the rider's legs, so behind the rider's leg rather. So you can see where the knee rolls would be at the front of the saddle here, to help the rider, and sometimes underneath, if you lifted the flap up, you could see a thigh roll as well. I think the eventing saddle there, you can see a bit of support there. So continental and French panels, both of these incorporate knee rolls and sometimes thigh rolls as well. The 2 designs are made in a slightly different way, but for the rider the only variation is that the French panel has a single thickness of leather under the thigh, whereas the continental design has a double thickness. In both cases, the panel reaches almost to the bottom of the saddle flap. Okay, full and half panels. So these do not normally incorporate knee and thigh rolls. A full panel reaches almost to the bottom of the saddle flap and is sometimes quilted. A half panel provides only the cushioning of the rider's weight for the horse. It reaches halfway down the saddle flap and has a large sweat flap on which the girth buckles lie. Okay, stuffing, so just so we're aware of what type of things the saddle ready is stuffed with. So all panels are stuffed with wool of varying quality, synthetic foam or felt, or they can be air filled. The panel must be evenly stuffed on each side of the saddle. It must never feel lumpy, especially on the weight-bearing areas. Okay, so that's your basics when it comes to your saddle. Now, let's have a look then at the saddle in a bit more detail. Once we lift the saddle flap up, we can see some other parts of the saddle. So here we've got, sometimes they'll call them the billets, but they can also call them the buckles and the buckle guards. You've got your buckle guards there, and your buckles, which would use for buckling up your girth straps, depending on what you want to call them. Generally we call them our girth straps and our buckle guard, but here we've got a billet keeper and billets. Knee roll, you can see your D-ring there, and also you've got your saddle flap as well, that's sometimes called the sweat flap, because if you're not using a numner, the other side of that will be against the horse's skin. In this image we have a reminder of the main parts of the saddle to the left there. We also have a picture showing us the safety catch for the stirrup release. As I mentioned, or I do mention in this video where I show you how to put the saddle on, I always keep mine down. I never put them up. The reason for putting them up would be if you're lunging your horse, or if you are leading a horse, you might pop them up just so that if the stirrup were to catch, it's not going to come off. However, I would always prefer my stirrups to come off, and also I worry that I would forget to pop the catch back down to ride, so I always keep mine down. Keeping it down means that the stirrup will come off if you get your foot caught and you come off the horse. You want the stirrup to come with you. You don't want to be dragged. Okay, so I always keep them down. If you can, keep them down. All right. We also can see the underside of the saddle here. So we've got what's known as the channel, or the gullet. So you can see it goes down through the middle of the saddle there. So that's important there, that is wide enough for the horse's spine, gives enough clearance to the horse's spine. Okay, you've also got the sweat flap, as we talked about in the previous picture, the saddle flap, the panels. So the panels there are either side of the gullet and lie on your pony's back, and the lining, which can be of various different materials. So let's just have a discussion then about the saddle. So the structure of the saddle. So all saddles are built on a tree. You can get treeless saddles which don't have a tree. They're made in a different way, or you can get saddles that are made on a leather tree. But generally speaking, the traditional way of making a saddle is to have them on a tree. The size and width of the tree determines the size and width of the saddle. The tree must fit the horse. If it does not, the saddle will never be satisfactory no matter how many modifications are made. That's why you might use a treeless saddle. If you have a horse, it's very difficult to find a tree that will fit it. Treeless might help you there. Okay. So the basis of the tree is usually laminated wood, but various materials such as plastic and fiberglass are also used. A spring tree saddle has a strip of flexible steel let into the tree on both sides at the waist. New British saddles should bear a British standard number, which guarantees the quality of the tree, and it will also have a letter, even narrow, so N for narrow, M for medium, N for narrow, M for medium, or W for wide, will be stamped on the stirrup bar. However, nowadays we are often having saddles with interchangeable gullets, so you can make the saddle narrower or wider depending on your horse, and the saddle fitter or yourself, if you know how to do it, can change the plate in the saddle to make it a different size. Okay, so we do have adjustable saddles nowadays. Okay, the seat of the saddle is built on a base formed of strips of webbing which are stretched along and across the tree. These strips must be made of exactly the correct tension if the seat of the saddle is to have the right dip, with its deepest part in the centre. The seat is padded over the webbing and covered by leather. Girth straps. So we can't see them in these picture, but in our previous image we had a look at girth straps. So these are attached to the webbing strips, which are stretched crosswise over the tree. There should be 3 straps, the first attached to one web over the tree, and the second and third to another web. For safety, the girth should always be buckled to the first strap and to either the second or the third. This will depend on the saddle, however, because some of the newer versions you can safely attach it to the second and third. Speak to your saddle fitter about this, because they will recommend which girth straps to use, and in some cases some saddles will have 4 straps, so you have even more options. So talk to your saddle fitter about that, because sometimes with some saddles to fit correctly and it's perfectly safe to use the second and third, but don't do so without their advice. Okay, so the stirrup bars, these are attached to the tree. Traditionally they are open-ended to allow the stirrup leathers to slip off, thus preventing a rider being dragged after a fall if his foot is caught in the stirrups. On most stirrup bars there is a hinge that allows the point to be turned up so the levers will not slip off when a saddled horse is being led without a rider, but they should never be up when the horse is being ridden. We already discussed that. Bars which are not open-ended or in the form of a D are not safe unless worn with safety stirrups. So you can get ones that are completely closed. You must use safety stirrups in this instance. Okay, and we already discussed the panel. Linings. So linings can be made of various different material, but leather is the easiest to clean and lasts a long time if it's well looked after and if the saddle is used frequently. Okay, so those are our types, our parts of the saddle. And what is important about those particular pieces. For more information, do have a look at your manual of horsemanship book, but those are the most important aspects to know in order to pass the badges.
Okay then, pony clubbers, so we're going to have a look at putting a saddle on. Hopefully we'll be able to see okay. As I mentioned in previous videos, Raven doesn't tie up very well. She has a tendency to pull back, and whilst I have safety head collars, it costs money every time I have to replace them. So I don't tend to tie her up. Generally speaking, you should tie your horse up whenever you're working with it in the stable, whether that's grooming, if you're mucking out, absolutely, if you're tacking up, or if you have a horse like mine that doesn't tie up very well, put a head collar on it, put the rope over its neck, or put a bridle on it, okay? So there are things you can do to make sure that you stay safe, so just bear that in mind. So we're going to use a general purpose saddle. Sorry, I'm going off screen. Again, remember, because of social distancing, I still am working on my own at the moment for these videos. Okay, because we're not actually open at the moment, so I'm doing these for my own pleasure, really. You know, we're not taking any money for these. Right, so this is my saddle, as you can see here. We went through the parts of the saddle, so we're happy with that. The way I've got it and the way I'm holding it is I'm hugging it. So I've got my left arm underneath the pommel, and I've got my right arm underneath the cantle. So my arms are in the gullet, all right? Now I've already got a saddle pad on this saddle, and I've got my girth attached. Now it might be that you don't, it might be you put your saddle pad on first, then the saddle, and attach the girth afterwards. That's also perfectly fine. Some riding stables, that's absolutely what you do. Here at Widbrook, your tack will be ready for you. Usually your horse will be tacked up, but if you wish to tack your own horse up, that is, we can absolutely accommodate that. We do teach stable management here, and hopefully we'll be getting started again soon. Okay, so this is a general purpose saddle, and I'm going to pop this on Raven. Now, I'm going to have to move her. She's already worked today, so she's a bit confused about why she's being tacked up. Good girl. Okay, right, so again, we go up to our horse. Remember how we safely approach our horse in the stable. Always to the shoulder, and let them know that we're here. We pick up our saddle, place it very, very gently over her withers, and slide it back into place. All right? Now, you want to make sure that your saddle is sat, over a bit darling, behind the scapula. The scapula is the shoulder bone here. So because when the horse moves, so if I pick up her leg Now that shoulder's then gone back, good girl. And so you want to make sure that there's room for that shoulder to rotate. Alright, so we slide it back. Alright, then what I would do is go around. If you've got your horse tied up, make sure when you go around the front, you undo them and then do them back up again so that they don't, if they pull back in fright, you could get injured and they could hurt themselves. So now I'm on the off side of the saddle. I know you can't see me properly here, but what I'm doing is I'm essentially just flattening everything out, so making sure the number's straight, just as I have on this other side here. Then we let our girth down. So our girth is here, and I just let it down. It's all right, darling. She's a bit of a nervy girl. All right. Now on this side, I'm just bringing the strap down. If your girth is done up quite tightly, what you may find is that your horse, before you put your own weight on the saddle, or the horse has kind of had a chance to accustom themselves to it, what you might find is the girth is really tight or doesn't even fit. Some horses blow themselves out, or they're just really relaxed. But you'll get your girth done up more as they deflate, as it were. Come on, let's go over a bit. Good girl. I know you don't understand what's going on. Good girl. All right then. So I've got my saddle on, and then I reach under. And if you've got a martingale on, like a standing martingale, running martingale, this is the time where you just pop the loop on the girth. If not, like we are here, we just pop that on, and we do it on the lowest hole, alright? Again, we want our horse to be relaxed. At the moment, he's not ready. Now, my girth straps are a slightly different length, so my back one's going to have to go up on the second hole, so that I can pop the other one on the first one. Okay, so let's just pop that on. As you can see, because she's quite a nervy pony, she tends to blow herself out a bit just when she's first tacked up, so just have to bear that in mind. And different ponies are like that, but I wouldn't want a longer girth, because you'd be amazed by how this girth actually fits her really well once she's moving, once I'm on her. Okay, so that's her with her saddle on. Alright, now to check, basic check of whether our saddle fits or not. They used to say 4 fingers under here, but now they've realised people have different size fingers, so we don't go with that. We just make sure that there's clearance all the way through the gullet, back and front. Now if you have a horse that's safe to stand behind, clearly it's not safe for me to do this at the moment, even though she's very likely to kick me. There's a wall right there, and I'll get squashed. So I'm just going to stand to the side and have a look through. There should be clearance and daylight all the way through, okay? Want to make sure you can get your hands down the front here, between the shoulder and the saddle, so that there's not tightness there. Check both sides, and you want to work to the dominant shoulder. So if you've got one shoulder bigger than the other, which is completely normal, make sure you're working to that one, not the smaller one. You don't want it too tight. And then the saddle balance. We want to make sure that the pommel and cantle are roughly the same height. That indicates the saddle is balanced on the horse. All right. And we've got our stirrup leathers on here. Always check that if you've got a stirrup bar that the bar goes, you can push it up, make sure that that's down. Here we never put our stirrup bars up, so you don't need to worry about that when you come for a lesson. But just make sure, if you do like to put the stirrup bars up, and the reason we put them up is if we're going to lunge the horse, we don't want the stirrups flying off the back. So we might put them up, or for leading the horse. I never touch mine. I leave them down all the time. The reason you want them down is in an emergency, if your foot got caught, you would want this stirrup to fly off with you. You do not want it staying attached and you being dragged. Really important. So make sure that happens. I like to keep my stirrups, my stirrup leather attached here through the keeper. The other thing you can do before you get on your horse is to check that your stirrups are roughly the right length. If they go into your armpit here, so from a straight line, they're roughly the right length. So that just means if you've got a horse that's a bit fidgety or a bit green or can be a bit nervous, like this one, it's helpful if you can just get straight on and you can just work the horse without having to faff around with your stirrups or your girth. It's not always the case. All our horses here are used to people changing their girths and stirrups because, of course, every rider is slightly different. But I always like to make sure I'm roughly right so that if I am on something that's a bit fractious, I can get cracking straight away with my work. Okay, excellent. So we're happy that this saddle, the other thing we want to check, another rough thing to check, but of course you would get a saddle fitter out to check completely whether the saddle fits. These are just at-home checks you can do, and you should check your saddle every so often. is make sure there's no bridging. So this panel underneath should touch the horse all the way along. There should be no daylight in there, and that's the same each side, all right? But it's important to get your saddle checked regularly by a saddle fitter because they are the experts, they know what they're doing. But this is just for you at home, just to make sure that you're happy, you know, to ride in that saddle in the meantime until you can get a professional out, all right? Okay, so that's our saddle. I hope you enjoyed that. This is a general purpose saddle, by the way. We do have a dressage saddle as well. But that's your general purpose, that's what you'd use for most things. You can do your schooling in that, you can hack in it, and you can jump in it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Oh, let's take the saddle off, that's probably a good idea. So how we would take our saddle off, and you'll probably have to do this after a lesson. Again, make sure you just let the horse know where you are. Undo the girth. And when you undo the girth, just be really careful not to bash, just let this go and let it bash the horse's leg, because it's not very nice if that happens. Now, there's two things you can do here. You can either go round and pop the girth up, or you can do this, where you just slide it over and make sure you catch it on the way down. Alright, so that's unsaddling for you. Okay, so that's it for the Lorinery badge and for the Saddlery big badge and mini badge. I'll post the syllabuses up after this little section so that you can see what it is that you'll be tested on. But I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions or comments, please do either put them below these videos or put them on the Widbrook Pony Club page. And we'll start a new topic as of next week.